Britain has a new opposition leader. Ed Miliband was elected Labour Party leader in a vote that came right down to the wire. So what do insiders make of that decision? Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by former economic advisor to Tony Blair, Derek Scott. Mr. Scott, thank you for joining us on the Pulse today. If you looked at the newspaper headlines of some of the more right-leaning papers this morning, you would think that everything that Tony Blair had done, and indeed the whole of New Labour, was dead. Is that how you see it? Not
really. I mean, clearly the Conservatives and Liberals are trying to present Ed Miliband as Red Ed, as they call it. I mean, there's something for them to go on insofar as he did get the support of the trade unions and some of the things he said during the campaign. But I think he's not a stupid man and knows that if he gets branded in that way, or the Labour Party gets branded in that way, they've got no chance of winning the next election.
It is, however, with all these cuts that are about to be brought in, it's quite kind of ripe ground, isn't it, to make hay, because you're able to say, well, look at these cuts. They are going to be painful. Nobody likes to see people losing their jobs. And actually to be on the trade union side at this particular point might be politically astute.
Well, I think up to a point, Lord Copper, as they say. I mean, clearly the public sector unions are very important in the Labour Party, but the electorate are not daft either, and they know that if the Labour Party suddenly says something different now that was to what they were saying in government, they're in big trouble. But you're right. I think one of the things is that almost anything could happen. You could see how the economic environment meant that the coalition government was re-elected, or you could easily see things going badly wrong, possibly for no fault of the government, where some people in the Labour Party would then be able to say, yeah, I told you so. So it's hugely unpredictable, and perhaps for the first time we haven't got a government that's obviously going to be in for two terms. It's going to be much more uncertain than that.
Now, as memoirs come out, we have seen more and more the wrangling that went on between Blair and Brown, and indeed the kind of the bitterness there. We've now got a situation where we've got the completely new blood, a whole new generation in, and yet we've got these two brothers, Ed and David Miliband, who've had clearly a relatively bitter rivalry over this election. Do you think there are parallels, or is that just...
Not really. I don't think. I mean, I don't know what David Miliband is going to do, and it clearly has a very unusual position. I think one thing you can say that Ed Miliband had the courage, if you want to say, put it that way, to challenge. Very often you only get one chance at this, and perhaps David's was to challenge Gordon Brown, which he didn't do for various reasons.
Yes.
But there are tensions there, and I think one of the interesting things is going to be the extent to which both David and Ed Miliband, and even other figures like Ed Balls, in a sense, come out of the shadow from their mentors. And we'll see over the next few years whether there's anything to them, or whether really they've just been carried along by in the shadows of bigger figures. My guess is that at least two of them will come out and be seen to be major political figures.
Do you mean both the Miliband brothers?
I think the person that's actually run the best campaign is Ed Balls. I mean, I had my fundamental disagreements with him, but I think one of the trouble about the two Milibands is that their speeches are full of abstract nouns and verbs, if I may put it that way. Ed at least said something concrete. He's very resilient. To that extent, he's a bit like my old boss, Dennis Healey, and he's hungry. So I think, in my view, the two people to really watch will be Ed Balls and Ed Miliband. The
two Eds rather than the two Milibands. Just looking at this job of Chancellor now, we don't know who's going to get it, or even who's been offered it for sure. It is a key role at the moment. Obviously, whoever Shadow Chancellor is going to be taking on the spending review.
Yes.
Alistair Darling did say that he wished to halve the budget over the next term of office, so that would be half the deficit, rather. And that's not a million miles away from where the coalition government are right now. Right. Ed Balls has said that he doesn't think that's the right view.
Yes, he does. I mean, I think it's a lot of rather silly arguments about this. I mean, the so-called Keynesian argument, you mustn't take the deficit down until recovery is underway, that's predicated by going into recession with the public finances in good order. Keynes might have tolerated a budget deficit of 3 or 4%. The notion that he would tolerate one of 10 or 11% is fantasy, so it does have to be cut. There's an obvious argument for putting Ed Balls in there, but my own feeling is that there's almost a... because he is apparently so well qualified for it, there's a danger, I think, that he wouldn't be the best person to do that. I mean, it's a difficult job being Shadow Chancellor. I think Dennis Healey would even acknowledge that he was a pretty lousy Shadow Chancellor. In my view, he was a very good Chancellor. And so putting David Miliband there is one option, or you could put Liam Byrne in there, who was Chief Secretary. So there are a number of options, and certainly, in a way, I think the government is most vulnerable on areas of law and order. And so one of the suggestions is Ed Balls goes to be Shadow Home Secretary, where he would undoubtedly put a fist on the Home Secretary in a quite effective way, I suspect.
Indeed. What about the rest of the old guard, Harriet Harman, Alistair Darling? What will happen to them?
Harriet is still deputy leader, so she'll probably float around in a rather similar way she's done already. Alistair gives the impression of being a very relaxed man. He's got lots of interests. He's very civilised, and in my view, he's the only person on the Labour side that has come out of the recent 2 or 3 years with improved integrity and authority. So he'll be an important figure, but in the background rather than on the front bench.
Now, I know that Ed Miliband has immediately dismissed the tag of Red Ed, but just how important is it that it was indeed the trade unions that gave him this leadership?
Well, it was, and very important. I mean, he wouldn't have won without them, there's no question about that, and some of the things he said. To that extent, he's got to get out of that position. I mean, somebody once said that, in America...
Can they exert pressure on him?
Well, they will exert pressure. I mean, not just financial pressure, but other ways as well. But if Ed Miliband doesn't make it clear that he is, as I said yesterday, his own man, and if he's seen to be in hock to public sector unions, then he's dead.
OK. Thank you very much indeed for joining us with your views this morning.